Justice was served when a racist cop was sentenced to prison for handcuffing a federal prosecutor in broad daylight. But the shocking incident exposed a system still in desperate need of change. The story begins on a seemingly ordinary afternoon in downtown Chicago, inside a bustling jewelry store. Shoppers browsed through glittering displays, unaware that a shocking incident was about to unfold. Federal prosecutor Marcus Johnson, a respected attorney with the U.S. Department of Justice, was shopping for an anniversary gift when he was approached by Officer Daniel Grayson, a veteran of the local police force. What happened next would spark outrage across the country. According to eyewitnesses, Officer Grayson confronted Johnson, accusing him of looking suspicious and demanding to see his identification. Johnson, knowing his rights, calmly explained that he was a federal prosecutor and had done nothing wrong. But Grayson, seemingly unmoved, escalated the situation. Within minutes, Johnson found himself handcuffed and detained in the middle of the store, as stunned onlookers watched in disbelief. The incident was captured on multiple cell phone cameras and quickly went viral. Social media erupted with anger as people demanded answers. How could a federal prosecutor, a man who had dedicated his career to upholding the law, be treated like a criminal in broad daylight? The answer, as many would soon learn, was rooted in a deeply troubling pattern of behavior. As the video of the incident spread, more stories began to surface about Officer Grayson's conduct. Former colleagues came forward, revealing a history of racially charged comments and aggressive behavior toward people of color. One officer, who asked to remain anonymous, described Grayson as a ticking time bomb who had been allowed to operate with impunity for years. Internal Affairs records showed multiple complaints against Grayson, ranging from excessive force to racial profiling. Yet, despite these red flags, he had never faced serious consequences. Critics argued that the department's failure to address Grayson's behavior had emboldened him, leading to the brazen confrontation with Marcus Johnson. For Johnson, the incident was a painful reminder of the systemic racism that continues to plague law enforcement. "I've spent my career fighting for justice," he said in a press conference. "But in that moment, I was just another black man being treated like a criminal. It was humiliating, infuriating, and heartbreaking." The case against Officer Grayson became a national spectacle, with media outlets from across the country covering every twist and turn. Prosecutors argued that Grayson's actions were not only a violation of Johnson's civil rights, but also an abuse of power that undermined public trust in law enforcement. Grayson's defense team, however, painted a different picture. They claimed that the officer had acted in good faith, believing that Johnson might have been involved in a recent string of jewelry store robberies. They argued that Grayson's actions were a result of the high-pressure environment of police work, not racial bias. But the evidence told a different story. Surveillance footage from the store showed no behavior from Johnson that could reasonably be interpreted as suspicious. Witnesses testified that Grayson had been confrontational from the start, using racially charged language and refusing to listen to Johnson's explanations. Perhaps most damning was the testimony of other officers, who described a culture of racism within the department that had allowed Grayson's behavior to go unchecked. The trial of Officer Daniel Grayson was not just a legal proceeding. It was a cultural moment that forced the nation to confront uncomfortable truths about race, power, and accountability. After weeks of intense testimony, emotional arguments, and a mountain of evidence, the jury delivered its verdict. Grayson was found guilty on all counts, including false imprisonment, civil rights violations, and official misconduct. The judge, in a stern and unflinching tone, sentenced him to 5 years in prison, a decision that sent shockwaves through the courtroom and beyond. For many, the verdict was a long overdue reckoning. For others, it was a reminder of how far we still have to go. The sentencing hearing was a dramatic culmination of a case that had gripped the nation. Marcus Johnson, the federal prosecutor who had been wrongfully handcuffed and humiliated, sat in the front row, flanked by his family and supporters. His presence was a powerful symbol of resilience and dignity, a stark contrast to the image of him in handcuffs that had gone viral months earlier. As the judge read the verdict, Johnson remained stoic, but the relief on his face was palpable. For him, this was not just about personal vindication. It was about holding a broken system accountable. In his closing remarks, the judge did not mince words. He described Grayson's actions as a gross abuse of power and a betrayal of the public trust. He emphasized that Grayson's behavior was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of misconduct that had been ignored for far too long. This case is not just about one officer, the judge said. It is about the culture that allowed him to act with impunity. It is about the failure of leadership to address systemic issues within the department. And it is about the harm caused to individuals like Mr. Johnson, who should never have been subjected to such treatment. The judge's words resonated deeply with those who had followed the case. For many, the trial had exposed not just Grayson's individual wrongdoing, but the systemic failures that enabled it. Testimony from fellow officers revealed a department rife with racial bias and a code of silence that protected bad actors. Internal Affairs records showed that Grayson had been the subject of multiple complaints over the years, yet he had never faced serious consequences. This lack of accountability, critics argued, had emboldened Grayson and others like him, creating an environment where misconduct was tolerated or even encouraged. For Marcus Johnson, the verdict was a bittersweet victory. In a press conference outside the courthouse, he spoke about the emotional toll the incident had taken on him and his family. "This isn't just about me," he said. "This is about every person of color who has been targeted, harassed, or worse by those who are supposed to protect us. It's about the countless individuals who don't have the platform or the resources to fight back. Today, justice was served, but we have a long way to go." Johnson's words struck a chord with many, particularly in communities of color that have long borne the brunt of police misconduct. For them, the case was a painful reminder of the systemic racism that continues to pervade law enforcement. Despite the progress that has been made in recent years, incidents like the one involving Johnson and Grayson underscore the persistent challenges that remain. According to data from organizations like the ACLU and the NAACP, Black Americans are disproportionately targeted by police, more likely to be stopped, searched, and subjected to use of force. These disparities are not just statistics. They are lived experiences for millions of people. The case also reignited debates about police reform and accountability. Advocates pointed to the verdict as evidence that change is possible, but they also stressed that it is not enough to simply punish individual officers. "We need systemic change," said one activist at a rally following the verdict. "We need to address the root causes of this behavior, from racial bias to the lack of oversight and accountability. We need to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve." One of the key issues highlighted by the case was the need for better training and support for officers. Testimony during the trial revealed that Grayson had received minimal training on implicit bias and de-escalation techniques, despite the fact that these are critical skills for modern policing. Critics argued that this lack of training contributed to the escalation of the incident with Johnson and other similar cases. "You can't expect officers to do better if you don't give them the tools to succeed," said one expert who testified during the trial. Training is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Another issue that came to the forefront was the need for greater transparency and oversight. The fact that Grayson had been able to accumulate multiple complaints without facing serious consequences raised serious questions about the department's internal review process. Advocates called for the creation of independent oversight boards with the power to investigate and discipline officers, as well as the implementation of body cameras and other technologies to increase accountability. "We can't rely on the police to police themselves," said one advocate. "We need external mechanisms to ensure that officers are held accountable for their actions." The case also sparked a broader conversation about the role of race in law enforcement. For many, the incident was a stark reminder of the ways in which racial bias can influence police behavior, even unconsciously. Studies have shown that implicit bias, the unconscious attitudes and stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions, can play a significant role in policing, leading to disparities in how people of different races are treated. Addressing this issue, experts argue, requires not just training, but a fundamental shift in the culture of law enforcement. For Marcus Johnson, the case has become a catalyst for change. In the months following the verdict, he launched a nonprofit organization dedicated to combating racial profiling and supporting victims of police misconduct. The organization, called Justice for All, provides legal assistance, advocacy, and education to communities affected by police violence. "We can't just sit back and hope things get better," Johnson said at the organization's launch event. "We have to be the ones to make it happen. We have to hold people accountable, push for systemic change, and ensure that no one else has to go through what I went through." Johnson's efforts have been met with widespread support, but they have also faced pushback from those who believe that the focus on police misconduct is unfair or exaggerated. Some critics have accused Johnson of being anti-police, a charge he vehemently denies. "This isn't about being anti-police," he said. "It's about being pro-justice. It's about ensuring that everyone, regardless of race, is treated fairly under the law. That's not a radical idea. It's the foundation of our democracy." As for Grayson, his time in prison will be a chance for reflection. But for many, the real question is whether his conviction will lead to meaningful change within law enforcement. Will this case be remembered as a turning point, or will it be just another chapter in a long, painful history? The answer advocates say, depends on what happens next. This verdict is a step in the right direction, said one activist, but it's just the beginning. We need to keep pushing for change, keep holding people accountable, and keep fighting for justice. Because until everyone is treated equally, none of us can truly be free. In the end, the case of Officer Daniel Grayson and Marcus Johnson is about more than just one incident. It is about the systemic issues that allow such incidents to occur and the work that must be done to address them. It is about the courage of individuals like Johnson, who refuse to stay silent in the face of injustice. And it is about the power of the justice system to hold people accountable, even when the odds seem stacked against it. As we move forward, let us remember the lessons of this case and work together to build a future where justice is truly blind. As the nation grapples with the fallout from this case, one thing is clear: the fight for justice is far from over. The story of Marcus Johnson and Officer Grayson is a stark reminder of the work that still needs to be done to ensure that everyone, regardless of race, is treated fairly under the law. For Johnson, the incident has become a catalyst for change. He has launched a nonprofit organization dedicated to combating racial profiling and supporting victims of police misconduct. We can't just sit back and hope things get better, he said. We have to be the ones to make it happen. As for Grayson, his time in prison will be a chance for reflection. But, for many, the real question is whether his conviction will lead to meaningful change within law enforcement. Only time will tell if this case will be remembered as a turning point, or just another chapter in a long, painful history. The story of the racist cop who handcuffed a federal prosecutor inside a jewelry store is more than just a headline. It is a reflection of the challenges we face as a society and a call to action for all of us to do better. As we move forward, let us remember the lessons of this case and work together to build a future where justice is truly blind.